I'm again back in our project. Just to bring this back to your mind quickly with Git branch, we have the master and the feature branch. In our master branch with Git log here, we have 4 commits at the moment, and actually we should maybe get rid of this merge commit. So let's quickly type git reset hard and now the head, where we go back 1 commit here. So let's see. Yeah, now this works. Now we only have these 3 commits in the master. And if we now switch to our feature branch in here, we can see that we have exactly the structure we saw on the slide. So we have 2 commits from the master, then the feature branch was created, and here we created 2 feature commits. So exactly what we had on the slide. Now, for the rebase feature, I would now like to show you what we did on the slide in practice. So let's keep in mind that this is our structure that we have, and the goal is to have the structure like this. So I want to merge the feature branch into the master without having to create any additional merge commits. So what we do, we first have to go to our feature branch. This is where we are, so we are in the right branch. And now the rebase command is quite straightforward. It simply says git rebase, and now you refer to the branch you want to rebase. And before I do this though, I want to highlight one thing. Because with git log here, we can see these IDs. So the IDs of our latest 2 commits that we created in the feature branch. Memorize these IDs. I'll show you a screenshot so you don't have to this, but memorize these before we now apply the rebase command. That's very important. So we now add git rebase, and with that what's going to happen is Git will check the changes made here in the feature branch, and it sees, okay, we added 2 additional commits. Then it will also check the changes made in the master branch. It will see, okay, we have this 3rd commit in the master branch. And in the end, Git will say, okay, I want to base these latest changes in the feature branch on the latest commit of the master branch. Therefore, instead of adding our feature commits here after this M2 commit, we want to add these feature commits after the M3 commit, so the 3rd commit that we have in our master branch. So enough of the words, let's now type git rebase, and now we will rebase our master branch in the feature branch. Let's do this. So we successfully rebased and updated everything. If we now check our log, you can see that we now have our F2, our F1, and here we now have M3. So now we rebased the feature commits here on the latest commit in the master branch. However, if you closely inspect these IDs now, this one and the other one we have here in the first commit, so I'll just show you right here as a comparison, you can see that the IDs changed. And that's the important thing about git rebase that you can also read on the internet, by the way, that rebasing creates new commits. The content, so what the commit is all about, is exactly the same, but the ID changes. And this can cause severe problems in real-world project if you share this with other people, as the history is rewritten, right? Because the history is based on commits and each commit can be identified by a unique ID. If you change this ID, the history is not the same. Therefore, this is not always the best thing to do. As I said, for our local project here, it's totally sufficient, and it can also be sufficient for your purposes in your own projects. However, with that, we now rebased our feature branch. And by the way, this can also be sufficient if you're working on a specific feature and you see, okay, this latest change in the master branch is important for me to complete my feature. Well, then you can also use the rebasing here, because now you have the latest state of the master branch in your feature branch, and now you can continue working on that feature. However, with that clear history in our case now, we can of course now simply switch to the master branch. Oops, not like this. Git switch master would be helpful. And now if you clear this, we can of course simply use our merge and merge our feature commits into the master branch. And if we do that, no surprise, we can see we created another fast forward merge. So if we log this now, you see that we simply moved the head up, which was previously for the master at M3, up to the F2 commit. And with that, we combined the rebasing feature with the merge feature. And with this, we also learned all about these different merging and rebasing options. Everything here is about combining different branches. I just want to make sure before we dive into the next topic that you understand when you can use this rebase feature and when it's maybe not the best idea. So when could I apply the rebase? Well, every time you have new commits in the master branch while you are working in the feature branch. That's a general thing when you could consider the rebase. If your feature relies on additional commits in the master branch, so if these new commits are important for you, well, then you can rebase the master branch into the feature branch. This will not affect your master branch, of course, but it will affect the ID of the commits you have in your feature branch. You just saw that in the example. As a second step, and we also saw this, you can use rebase if the feature is finished and if the implementation into the master should be done without the merge commit. Then you can do exactly what we did now. You rebase the master into the feature branch and then you fast forward merge the feature into the master. So that's exactly the workflow that I just presented you in practice. That's just a quick summary of what we actually did right here. However, remember, rebasing rewrites code history. You saw it in your commits with the IDs, so be very careful when using it in public repositories, so repositories you share with other people on GitHub, for example. As I said, Git even recommends to never use rebase in such repositories. It can depend on the project and depend on what you agreed on. However, this is it when it comes to Git merge and Git rebase. Before we continue though, there is one last topic we should discover here, because so far all our merges were successful. But what if we have a merge conflict? What if things go wrong? We learned a lot about how we can merge branches. Up to now, merging always worked perfectly, right? We never had any kind of problems. We never saw any kind of emerging conflict. Now, turns out that in your real world projects, typically if you work together with other people, such conflicts probably occur. Now, we will not dive into all potential conflicts you have in here. We'll in the next module see how we can fix conflicts which even prevent you from starting a merge. In this lecture now, I want to show you how we can fix conflicts which occur during the merge. Now, if a conflict happens during a merge, this typically is the case if two people in two different branches worked on the same file in the end, for example. Let's create such an example, and for this I want to use a file here in the feature branch, maybe this F1 text file here. At the moment, if we quickly check Git branch here, you see we are in the master branch. So let's say in this master branch we added the first line of this text file and say this is the change made in the master branch. Okay, so we save this, we add it to our staging area, and we commit the change as we learned it throughout the course. So let's say this is the change in master, right? Now we switch to our feature branch in here. And in the feature branch, we know that both branches were merged before with the rebase in this case and the following merge. So we have the same commits in here. So we also go to F1 text and say, I changed this in the feature branch. Like this, we do the same thing. We add it and we commit it. And let's say this is change in feature branch here. Okay, so far no big problem. But now if we switch back to our master branch, and now if we just want to start our merge with the feature, well, this probably won't work, right? Because two people at the same time worked in the same file and in the same position in the same line of this file. Let's see what happens now. Well, you see, we have a merging conflict and we have some help of our IDE here. In this case, we're using Visual Studio Code. This is a default feature of Visual Studio Code, by the way, so that's quite helpful. And you can see that the automatic merge failed here. We first have to fix the conflicts and then we can commit the result of this merge. Now, to fix this conflict, we have different options. As I said, I highly recommend to use VS Code in this case because it helps you a lot in such cases with implemented features. We can accept either the current change or the incoming change. The current change, as you can see, is the change in our current branch. We are currently in the master branch, therefore this is the change in this branch. Or we can accept the incoming change. As I said, this would be the change made in the feature branch. We can also accept both changes. I'll show you soon how this works. And we can compare the changes first. Now the thing is that this is a rather simple example, so to say, but if you have a bigger code base, then comparing these two changes is definitely very helpful. So let's try this out as a first step maybe. If we do so, you can see that we have now a comparison of the left of the current change and the right, the incoming change. And as you can see, VS Code even identifies parts of both changes which are equal. For example, change right here in the branch. So this is equal, but it highlights the changes that are made which are not equal. So here you can now compare the two changes and the two differences you have in these two versions. Can then close this, then you're back here in this menu. Or you can either say, as I said, accept the current change, the incoming change, or both changes. Accepting both changes, we can try this here, will mean that it simply adds both of these files below each other, not what I want. So let's undo this with Ctrl Z. So we are back here. Now, fixing this would be very simple. I'm totally aware of this. But besides the message you get right here, you can also use our good old git status command, this one here. This will also give you more information about the conflict that you have and also about the solutions you have to kind of, well, fix this conflict. The first option is the one we just tried. We could fix the conflicts and run git commit, so we can change this conflict here in a way that we accept the current or the incoming change, and then we can create the commit with these new changes, and with that we have a fixed file in the end. Or you can also use the command you see up here, so git merge -- abort will just abort this merge, and if you try this now, as you can see, the merge is not done, so we are back in the state before we applied the git merge command. Besides that, if we retry to merge the two branches, we get of course the same error again. You can also use git log -- merge here, so with the merge flag. And if you do so, you see the two commits you want to merge here. So you can exactly identify that you have the commit here with that ID in the feature branch and the head of the master branch here with this here. Now in this case, it's quite obvious, but this can be quite helpful if you have bigger projects. Another thing you can do is you can use the git diff command, a command we'll have a look at in the next lectures again. So if you try this here, you can also find the problems you have. So at the one hand, you have this change here in the master branch. Down here, you have the change made in the feature branch. Therefore, also help her to gain more insights into this merge conflict. In the end, what I want to do right now, I want to fix this merge by accepting the current change, which I can do up here. With that, this is done. Now I can save this. And now I can say, I want to check my status once again. Again, I can see we have unmerged paths. In this case, we don't have any more conflicts, but we have the problem that we have to add these changes to our staging area. So let's run git add once again. And let's now create a commit message saying merged feature and master in F1 file, for example, like this. And if we now check our log in the master file, you can see that we have now this latest commit created in here. Now, as I said, conflicts can arise in different ways. We'll also dive into conflicts in the GitHub module in a bit more detail, but that's a pretty common conflict you have. So working on two files at the same time in two branches maybe, then you want to merge it, then you have the problem. So this is how you can easily fix such conflicts.